This is the Gate of Mercy behind me, or in its other name, the Golden Gate in the Old City of Jerusalem. It's the only eastern gate of the Temple Mount. It has been blocked and sealed like this for close to 1,000 years. It's the most mysterious gate in Jerusalem that has unique significance for Christians, Jews, and Muslims.
Imagine a gate in Jerusalem sealed for 500 years, blocked so completely it looks like a scar in the ancient wall. This is the Golden Gate, the Gate of Mercy.
This is the Golden Gate. It's the East Gate. It's known as the Mercy Gate to Jerusalem. As you can tell, it's been sealed up for a long, long time.
And for centuries, every ruler, every guard, every stone was placed out of fear of what might walk through it. What secret could be so powerful that generations went to such lengths to stop it? A prophecy older than Christianity, older than Islam, whispers that one day it will open, and when it does, everything we think we know about history, faith, and the city itself could be shattered. What has been hidden for half a millennium is stirring again. Are you ready to witness it? The Gate of Prophecy. To understand why this gate matters, you need to understand where it sits and what it faces, because the geography is not incidental, it is theological. The Golden Gate is the only eastern entrance to the Temple Mount, the 35-acre platform that once held the Jewish temple, and the most sacred site in Judaism, and that now holds the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque, two of the most sacred structures in Islam. The gate faces due east. Directly across the Kidron Valley, no more than a few hundred meters away, rises the Mount of Olives. That mountain, in all three Abrahamic faiths, is the place where the final act of history begins. In Jewish tradition, it is where the resurrection of the dead will commence. In Christian tradition, it is where Jesus ascended to heaven and where the angels told his disciples he would return in the same manner. In Islamic tradition, it is connected to the Day of Judgment itself. Three faiths, one mountain, one gate, and a shared expectation that something is coming through it.
The Muslims also believe that Jesus is a great prophet. They also believe that he's coming back. They also believe that he is going to judge the whole world.
The gate's origins are debated, but its foundations are ancient. Some archaeological evidence suggests that a gate has existed on this spot since at least the time of the Second Temple, and the structure that Herod the Great expanded into one of the architectural wonders of the ancient world, and that the Romans destroyed in 70 AD. The current structure, the twin-arch doorway visible today, dates primarily to the Byzantine period, likely the 6th or 7th century, though it incorporates older stonework and sits on foundations that may reach back 1,000 years further. The gate has had many names across the centuries. In Hebrew, it is Sha'ar Harakamim, the Gate of Mercy. In Christian tradition, it is the Golden Gate, the beautiful gate, the gate mentioned in Acts chapter 3, where Peter healed a lame man, and, most significantly, the gate through which Jesus entered Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, riding a donkey, fulfilling the prophecy of Zechariah to the letter. That moment, the triumphal entry, is one of the most carefully documented events in the Gospels. All four Gospel writers record it. Jesus came from the Mount of Olives, and descended through the Kidron Valley, and entered the Temple Mount through the eastern gate, while crowds laid palm branches in his path and shouted Hosanna. It was a deliberate, public, unmistakable fulfillment of Zechariah chapter 9, verse 9. Which states that the king would come to Jerusalem, riding on a donkey, entering through the eastern gate. The entry was not symbolic. It was geographical. It was specific. It used this gate. And the prophetic tradition holds that when the Messiah returns, he will use it again. Same mountain, same valley, same gate. And everyone who has ever controlled Jerusalem has known this, which is exactly why it is sealed. Prophecy, vision, and the Messiah. The prophecy that governs the Golden Gate comes primarily from two Old Testament sources, and both of them are extraordinarily specific. The first is Zechariah chapter 14. It describes a day when the Lord will stand on the Mount of Olives, and the mountain will split in two from east to west, creating a great valley. The Lord will then enter Jerusalem as king over the whole earth. The direction is east to west. The route passes through the Kidron Valley. The entrance point is the Eastern Gate. The second source is Ezekiel, chapters 40 through 44, which describes a prophetic vision of a future temple. In chapter 44, Ezekiel is brought to the Eastern Gate and told explicitly that this gate shall be shut, it shall not be opened, and no man shall enter by it, because the Lord, the God of Israel, has entered by it. Therefore it shall be shut. Read that again. The gate is to be sealed because God has already passed through it, and it will remain sealed until he passes through it again. For Jewish believers, this prophecy refers to the coming of the Messiah, whom they await for the first time. For Christians, it refers to the return of Christ, who already passed through this gate 2,000 years ago and who will pass through it again at his second coming. The gate is shut in this reading, precisely because its function is reserved. It is not a public entrance, it is a royal door, sealed by divine command until the rightful king arrives to open it. And no human authority has the right to unseal it prematurely. The man who sealed it in its current form knew all of this. In the 1540s, Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, the most powerful ruler in the Islamic world, the man who rebuilt the walls of Jerusalem that stand today, and whose architectural legacy defines the old city's skyline, ordered the Golden Gate bricked shut. The historical accounts differ on his exact reasoning, but the consistent thread across multiple Ottoman sources, travel journals, and religious commentaries is that Suleiman was acutely aware of the Jewish and Christian prophecy that the Messiah would enter through the Eastern Gate. Whether he feared this prophecy, respected it, or simply wanted to prevent it from being used as a rallying point for religious uprisings against Ottoman rule, he sealed the gate with stone and mortar and then did something even more calculated. He established a Muslim cemetery directly in front of it, all filling the ground between the gate and the Kidron Valley with graves. The graves were placed deliberately, strategically, with theological precision. According to the understanding of the time, a Jewish priest, a Kohen, or any holy figure operating under Jewish ritual purity law could not walk through a graveyard without becoming ceremonially unclean. The cemetery was not a coincidence. It was not a natural expansion of existing burial grounds. It was a theological countermeasure, a human attempt to weaponize religious law against the very prophecy that religious law had foretold.
This site in Jerusalem's Old City is sacred to two religions. Muslims believe it's where the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven. Jews revere it as the site of two biblical temples.
Think about the audacity of that for a moment. A human ruler looked at a divine prophecy, a prophecy recorded in Scripture that his own faith tradition acknowledged as coming from God, and said, "I am going to prevent this from happening. I am going to build a wall of stone and a field of graves, and I am going to stop the Almighty from walking through his own gate." And for 500 years, the gate has remained sealed, but the prophecy has not been withdrawn. The Mount of Olives has not moved. The valley has not been filled. The gate still faces east, and every element of the prophetic geography remains exactly where it was when Zechariah and Ezekiel wrote their visions 2,500 years ago. The human barrier is in place. The divine appointment has not been cancelled. And the tension between those two facts is what makes the Golden Gate the most charged, most watched, and most spiritually volatile piece of architecture on the planet. Signs, mysteries, and modern phenomena. Now let me be careful here, because I want to tell you what has been reported without telling you what to believe about it. My job is to lay out the evidence and let you make your own assessment. But what I can tell you is that in recent decades, a pattern of events surrounding the Golden Gate has drawn increasing attention from religious observers, historians, and even some scientific researchers, and the pattern is difficult to dismiss entirely, even for skeptics. The most widely discussed reports involve the physical structure itself. Engineers and archaeologists who have examined the gate's masonry over the years have noted something unusual. Despite being sealed with stone and mortar in the 16th century, and despite enduring 5 centuries of weather, seismic activity, and the general entropy that reduces most ancient structures to rubble, the Golden Gate's sealed facade has shown signs of unexplained stress. Cracks have appeared and disappeared. Mortar has crumbled in sections that were not exposed to unusual weathering. In 2003, a portion of the wall adjacent to the gate partially collapsed after a period of seismic activity, prompting emergency repairs by the Jordanian Waqf, the Islamic trust that administers the Temple Mount. The repairs were carried out quickly and quietly, but the event was noted by observers who have been monitoring the site for years. The wall is not as stable as it looks, and every time it shifts, people notice. Then there are the accounts that are harder to categorize. Visitors to the Kidron Valley, particularly those who pray at the ancient Jewish cemetery on the Mount of Olives, have reported unusual experiences near the sealed gate. Unexplained lights seen in the area after dark, particularly in the hours before dawn, and a sense of presence that multiple unrelated witnesses have described independently using remarkably similar language. A feeling of weight, of anticipation, of something building behind the stone. In 2019, Israeli police briefly closed the area around the gate after reports of unauthorized gatherings by groups who claimed to be holding prayer vigils for the gate's opening. The gatherings included Jews, Christians, and Muslims. People who, on every other theological question imaginable, disagree with one another profoundly, gathering in the same narrow valley, facing the same sealed doorway, united by the shared conviction that something about this specific place is changing. Jerusalem sits on a seismically active zone. The Jordan Rift Valley, which runs directly beneath the Kidron Valley and the Mount of Olives, is part of the same tectonic system that created the Dead Sea and the Great Rift Valley of Africa. Earthquakes are not uncommon here, but geologists monitoring the region have noted that seismic microactivity in the immediate vicinity of the Temple Mount has shown subtle increases over recent decades. Small tremors, subsurface shifts, nothing catastrophic. Nothing that would make the evening news, but patterns that, to anyone familiar with Zechariah's prophecy that the Mount of Olives will split in two, carry a resonance that purely scientific analysis cannot fully address. The ground is moving. It has always moved. But it is moving in the place where the prophecy says it will move. And the people who watch these things are watching very closely. And then there is the political dimension. In 2019, Israeli authorities briefly opened a section of the Golden Gate complex for Muslim worship, after it had been sealed as a security measure since 2003. The decision sparked immediate controversy. Jewish groups protested that Muslim access to the gate area constituted a violation of the status quo agreements governing the Temple Mount. The Palestinian Authority celebrated the opening as a political victory.
The removal of Israeli security installations from the entrance to a contested holy site in Jerusalem brought celebrations from hundreds of Palestinians outside.
And religious observers across all three faiths noted that for the first time in years, the question of the Golden Gate's status had moved from theological abstraction to geopolitical reality. The gate was in the news. The gate was being discussed in diplomatic channels. The gate, after centuries of being treated as a sealed historical curiosity, was suddenly alive in the political conversation. Whether that represents prophecy unfolding or simply the ordinary friction of Jerusalem politics depends on your perspective. But the fact that this specific gate, among all the gates of the Old City, has become a flashpoint is, at minimum, noteworthy. The Gate of Three Faiths. Here is something that gets lost in the arguments about who controls the Temple Mount and who has the right to pray where and which flag flies over which corner of the Old City. The Golden Gate is one of the only physical locations on Earth where Jewish, Christian, and Islamic eschatology converge on the same geographic point with the same fundamental expectation. All three faiths anticipate a messianic or divine figure arriving at the end of history. All three connect that figure to the Mount of Olives. All three acknowledge the Eastern Gate as the entrance point. And all three have traditions that describe the current sealed state of the gate as temporary, as a pause in a story that has not yet reached its final chapter. Three religions that disagree on almost everything agree on this. Something is coming through that door. In Jewish tradition, the Messiah will arrive at the Mount of Olives, while the dead will rise from the ancient cemetery that covers its western slopes, and the Sha'ar Harachamim, the Gate of Mercy, will open to receive him as he enters the Temple Mount to restore the divine presence that departed when the Second Temple was destroyed in 70 AD. This is not a peripheral belief, it is central to Jewish messianic expectation. It is why the Mount of Olives has been the most sought-after Jewish burial ground in the world for over 3,000 years. Over 150,000 graves cover that hillside today, and the oldest date back to the First Temple period. These people chose to be buried there for one reason. They wanted to be first in line when the resurrection begins. They wanted to be close to the gate when it opens. In Christian tradition, the convergence is even more specific because it has already happened once. Jesus entered Jerusalem through the Eastern Gate on Palm Sunday, fulfilling Zechariah 9, verse 9. I to the letter. He came from the Mount of Olives, descended through the Kidron Valley, and passed through the gate while crowds laid palm branches and shouted Hosanna. After his resurrection, he ascended to heaven from the Mount of Olives, and two angels told the watching disciples in Acts chapter 1 that this same Jesus would return in the same manner. Same mountain, same direction, same gate. Christian eschatology does not merely expect the gate to open. It expects a specific person to walk through it a second time, completing a journey that began 2,000 years ago and was deliberately left unfinished. In Islamic tradition, the connection runs through the concept of Yawm al-Qiyamah, the Day of Judgment. Islamic eschatology holds that the final reckoning will unfold in the Kidron Valley, which Muslim tradition identifies with the Valley of Jehoshaphat, mentioned in the Quran, the place where all of humanity will be gathered and judged. The gate that the Arabic sources call Bab al-Rahmah, the Gate of Mercy, and Bab al-Tawbah, the Gate of Repentance, stands as the threshold between judgment and mercy. The righteous will pass through, the condemned will not. The Islamic Waqf, the Jordanian-administered trust that has controlled access to the Temple Mount since 1967, has treated the Golden Gate area with extraordinary sensitivity for decades, restricting access, monitoring structural changes, and responding to any perceived encroachment with immediate diplomatic protest. In February 2019, when Palestinians reopened a prayer space within the gate's interior chambers after it had been sealed by Israeli authorities since 2003, the event triggered an international diplomatic incident involving Israel, Jordan, the Palestinian Authority, and the United Nations, over a sealed gate, over a prayer room inside a blocked doorway. That is the level of tension this single piece of architecture carries. And this is what makes the Golden Gate unique in all of human civilization. The Western Wall is sacred to Judaism, but holds no prophetic function in Christianity or Islam. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre is sacred to Christians, but plays no role in Jewish or Muslim end-times expectation. The Al-Aqsa Mosque is deeply significant to Islam, but is not central to Jewish or Christian eschatology. The Golden Gate stands alone. It is the singular point where 3 billion people, roughly 40% of the human race, belonging to 3 separate faiths that have spent centuries in theological conflict with one another, look at the same ancient stone and see the same future. Whether you interpret that convergence as divine orchestration, extraordinary coincidence, or the inherited echo of a shared Abrahamic memory, the weight of that collective expectation is a force in itself. And that force is growing. Or rabbis are intensifying daily prayers facing the sealed gate from the Mount of Olives. Christian pilgrimage groups now spend longer at the Kidron Valley viewpoint than at almost any other site in Jerusalem. And the Waqf watches the gate with a vigilance that suggests they understand something about its significance that extends far beyond ordinary architectural preservation. Everyone is watching. And what they are watching for is the same thing: a divine timing and what may come. There is a concept that runs through all 3 Abrahamic faiths, expressed in different language and different theological frameworks, but carrying the same essential meaning. It is the idea that God operates on a timeline that is not subject to human urgency, human politics, or human impatience. His calendar is not ours. His clock does not run by our hours. In Judaism, it is captured in the phrase from Isaiah chapter 60, verse 22. In its time, I will hasten it. A passage that suggests God has appointed a specific moment for the fulfillment of prophecy, and that moment will arrive neither early nor late, regardless of how desperately humanity wants to accelerate or delay it. The rabbis debated whether this meant the timing was fixed or conditional, whether human righteousness could speed it up and human sin could slow it down. But the core idea remained. The appointment belongs to God. In Christianity, it is expressed in Christ's own words from Acts chapter 1. It is not for you to know the times or the seasons that the Father has set by his own authority. The disciples wanted a date. Christ told them the date was not theirs to have. In Islam, it is woven into the concept of divine decree, al-qadr, the understanding that God's plan unfolds according to his wisdom alone, and that human attempts to force or prevent the divine schedule are not merely futile, but presumptuous. The Golden Gate embodies this principle more perfectly than any other object on earth. For 500 years it has been sealed. For 500 years,
gates have been blocked by Solomon the Magnificent. He's the one who added these stones to block the way into Al-Aqsa Mosque that is under these arches.
people have prayed for it to open. For 500 years it has not opened, but it has also not been destroyed. Not by earthquakes, not by wars, not by the dozens of armies that have fought over Jerusalem since Suleiman built his walls. Every other structure in this city has been damaged, rebuilt, demolished, reconstructed, repurposed, or replaced. The Golden Gate has simply waited, sealed and silent and perfectly preserved in its sealed state, as if the very forces of entropy that reduce everything else to dust have been told to leave this particular doorway alone. And now, in our generation, the signs are multiplying. Not apocalyptic signs, not dramatic Hollywood-style portents that would make the skeptics laugh and the faithful panic. Quiet signs, the kind of signs that only people who are paying attention would notice. The subtle seismic shifts beneath the Temple Mount, the cracks in the mortar that appear without explanation, the unprecedented convergence of interfaith attention on a single sealed doorway, the geopolitical tensions that keep placing the Temple Mount at the center of global diplomacy, the re-emergence of the Golden Gate as a living issue rather than a historical footnote, the growing sense, reported independently by believers across 3 continents and 3 religious traditions, that something is stirring, not on the surface, beneath it, behind the stone, below the graves, in the silence that has lasted 5 centuries and that feels to those who listen most carefully like it is about to break. I am not going to tell you that the gate is about to open tomorrow. I am not going to tell you to sell your possessions and stand in the Kidron Valley.
And back up through that Golden Gate to stand trial before Caiaphas the high priest and then ultimately before Pontius Pilate.
I am going to tell you what the evidence tells me, and what the evidence tells me is this. And every prophetic condition described in the ancient texts remains geographically intact. The Mount of Olives is still there, the Kidron Valley is still there, the gate is still there, sealed exactly as Ezekiel said it would be, facing exactly the direction it has always faced, waiting for exactly the event it was built to serve. Nothing about the prophetic geography has changed in 2,500 years. And something about the prophetic atmosphere is changing right now. The Golden Gate has outlasted sultans, empires, and centuries of human ambition. It has withstood wars, shifting borders, and the passage of time, remaining exactly where it has always stood. Sealed, unbroken, waiting. Could this be the generation that finally sees it open? Could the subtle signs, the converging attention, the quiet stirrings of history be pointing to something long anticipated, yet still unknowable? The gate waits. The question is not whether it will open, but whether you are ready to see what lies beyond.